Hello again, everybody, and welcome to CaneSport Right Now as the Miami Hurricanes continue their countdown to the season opener in Atlanta against the Alabama Crimson Tide. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined today by Tony Tsoukalas from Bama Insider.com, who's going to answer all kinds of questions for us about just where this Alabama football team stands 3 weeks out from opening night. Tony, welcome back to CaneSport TV. Always appreciate you coming to visit with us and give us some insight into Alabama. You can understand what a monumental event this is for the Miami fan base to have the opportunity to play the defending national champions. We don't get a ton of information down here about Bama other than the fact that we know that they take an awful lot of players from the state of Florida. So let's talk a little bit about this year's Alabama team, how it's coming together in training camp. I got a few questions for you, but let's start with your overall impressions from what you've seen in the first week of camp up there in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I think it's gone pretty well from an Alabama standpoint. One thing that I really kind of noticed is the offensive line seems to be gelling. Well, we're just heading into the first scrimmage, so we'll really see how that kind of comes together. But it looks like, Alabama's got at least 4 of the 5 offensive linemen really solidified. It seems like they're really comfortable. So that was a big question mark. And then there's been a lot of, positive buzz around some of the newcomers. Kool-Aid McKinstry is the top cornerback in this year's class. Seems to be doing pretty well, playing pretty physically at that cornerback spot, maybe, where he could take over for Patrick Surtain. I think you're seeing the defense. This Alabama defense is going to be special, or at least it has the talent to be. So it's kind of going to be interesting to see how that all comes together. But I mean, things are looking promising. I guess we'll see a little bit more as camp rolls on. But you have to be pretty encouraged by what you've seen from Alabama so far this fall.
All right, obviously so much focus on the offense. You talked about the offensive line, so let me start there. It seems like a key matchup for Alabama in this game, once you get past the fact that they're heavy favorites, is going to be running the ball against Miami's defense. There's no question that Saban and company watched Miami game tape from late last year. They saw the absolute butt kicking that North Carolina was able to do up front, putting up a school record total of offense against Miami's defense. You can make different excuses for it, whatever, coronavirus, but everybody was dealing with different things last year. And Carolina physically manhandled Miami's defense. So that figures to be something with a new quarterback coming in that Alabama wants to exploit. And with that offensive line, if it's coming together the way you say it is, and they do recruit extremely well at that position, obviously, I got to think that that's a big focus in training camp and probably one that they feel pretty good about. Another one has to be Bryce Young coming in as a first-year quarterback. My guess is they will not want to put too much on his plate in the opener. That's why I think that running the Miami's run defense as it matches up to Alabama's offensive line is, to me, the key matchup in this game. What have you seen from Bryce Young so far in camp, and how much playbook do they seem to be throwing his way?
It's hard to see what all they're throwing his way because we only get to see the first 15 minutes of practice, and we only get that so often. I mean, to no surprise, he throws the ball really well during drills that we've gotten to see. The biggest thing we've got to see is in the spring, we got to see the A-Day game, which is their annual spring scrimmage. He looked great. He won MVP of that game. He looked a lot more composed in that game than he did at times last year. Granted, last year was a totally kind of unique situation because he was entering games late with not very much of a playbook to work with. Most of the time, he was just handing the ball off and then throwing on 3rd and long. So I think we're going to see Bryce Young perform well pretty much off the bat. Alabama has been confident. They haven't named him a starter, but they essentially did name him a starter. And it's the only time that I can remember in the Nick Saban era that a quarterback's come in without a start and really just been the guy. There hasn't really been a quarterback competition per se this offseason. So that just shows the confidence they have in Bryce. But you're right. I think in this opener, if you're Miami, you're going to want to stop the run on early downs, set up some tough situations for Bryce Young, and then and get some pressure on him. And he's a guy that obviously can move in the pocket, but he might also, as a young quarterback, be a guy that might take an unnecessary risk. So I think that would be the game plan from a Miami perspective,
No
is
doubt.
just create those 3rd and longs, and then just kind of see what happens. Hopefully you're able to capitalize on a young mistake from Bryce Young.
You want him, you want him to make mistakes. I mean, he's going to make mistakes. I mean, if he comes out and plays a perfect football game, it's going to be shame on Miami's defense. And I don't expect that, because, I know Manny Diaz by now after watching him, for 6+ years now, and he's coming after Bryce Young, and he's coming after Bama's offense, and he's going to make them prove the first time around that they're ready to make decisions at game speed, and he's going to look for negative plays and try to put them in bad situations. Miami has nothing to lose in this game. So, there's nobody on the planet that expects them to win this game. So they're going to come out on defense, and they're going to put pressure galore on Bryce Young, and they're going to test that offensive line, and they're going to try to put him in bad situations, and that'll ultimately shape the game, how well he handles it. Now, we talked about the running game, the offensive line being such a key factor in the game coming up. What about Brian Robinson? From what I understand, he's become the number 1 tailback there in Tuscaloosa. What can you tell us about him?
He's definitely the most experienced tailback that they have. I don't necessarily think he's going to step into that, quote unquote bell cow role that maybe they had with Najee Harris. I think you're going to go back to Alabama using more of a running back by committee. There's just so many other talented backs there. Brian Robinson's obviously the veteran. He's a 5th-year senior. But then you've also got Jason McClellan and Roydell Williams, 2 sophomores that showed promise, especially Jason McClellan at times last year, broke a couple of big runs. And then you've also got the return of Trey Sanders. And, he's been a full participant so far in camp. If he's able to come back, to his 5-star status, he's probably the most talented running back of that whole bunch. So be really interesting to see how much carries, or what the percentage of carries that Brian Robinson gets, because there's a lot of guys, and I didn't even mention Kamar Wheaton, who's the top running back in this class. I don't really expect him to get many carries this year just because of how loaded those other 4 guys are. But there's a lot of ways Alabama can spread the ball. I expect Brian Robinson to get the most carries out of that bunch, but I'm not sure it's going to be an overwhelming majority.
All right. And I also got to ask you about the tight end, Jaleel Billingsley. Was a key cog in the offense a year ago, had a pretty good season. He has been absent, from what I understand, from early drills. What's the situation there?
Yeah, I think he missed the first 2 practices. At first, Nick Saban had commented a little bit about how much he needs to kind of buy in and be a leader. And so, but then after, he returned to practice, Nick Saban said it had to do with COVID protocols. So kind of a mysterious situation there with Jaleel Billingsley. But look, Alabama needs him to kind of be a star player, be a role player. Because, he is a huge option. He's probably one of the best offensive tight ends, just from a pass catching standpoint in the nation. So he should be a target. And you look at young quarterbacks, I think Bryce Young might lean on a tight end just because that's what young quarterbacks kind of sometimes they tend to do. It's nice to have that good tight end option. So, Jaleel Billingsley is a big part of this offense, and I think maybe part of his absence early in spring might have been somewhat of a wake-up call, because Alabama needs him totally bought in because he's truly going to be a leader, not only in this unit, but possibly in the offense as well.
You mentioned COVID protocols. I might as well throw in here that the Alabama football team is 95% vaccinated, and I think that's indicative of the grip that Nick Saban has on that program. And there is an awareness in college football that coronavirus and the way it's spreading around the country right now can derail somebody's college football season. And it's a little bit of a concern here at Miami. There's only 85% vaccination. They're doing things trying to keep the unvaccinated guys from being in closed rooms and things like that. They're watching meetings on the Jumbotron screen in the indoor practice facility. I mean, just crazy. I don't quite understand it, so that's a little side note here with obviously coronavirus spiking as much as it is in Alabama. and throughout the South. It's a big topic in the SEC, and the Bama football team's 95% vaccinated. Okay, let me ask you real quick about the receiver positions. I saw Mechie, Bolden, and Baker are running first team right now. I've heard so much about Ajay Hall and the things that he's capable of physically, the true freshman, phenom wide receiver, latest, hotshot recruit for Bama at that position. How big of a role do you think he will have on opening night?
I don't know. I mean, he's definitely a guy that can make a catch, and we saw what he could do in the spring game, the 8A game. But I think Alabama is going to lean on its veterans early. I mean, you saw Baker out there with that third spot. I also the Ohio State transfer, Jamison Williams, is a guy that can really take the top off of a defense. I wouldn't be surprised to see him either start or see plenty of playing time as well, just because Alabama is going to need guys that can kind of burner guys. They're missing that. They had that with Waddle, and to a lesser extent with Devontae Smith, and they need those guys that can really take the top off the defense to kind of open up for Slade Bolden and John Mechie, who are not slow, but they're not those guys. And I think it helps to open up the field a little bit more. Ajay Hall is not necessarily he by no means is he slow, and he can actually move, but I don't know if he's that like track star speed that's going to do that. I think he's more of like a bigger receiver. He reminds me a lot of Jerry Jeudy, just with his catches that he makes, and maybe just being from Florida. But I really liked his game in 8A. I'm not sure if he's going to have like a huge role this season, but I mean, if he keeps on making catches like that, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field.
Another little subplot in this game to me is Bill O'Brien. Obviously, an accomplished coach, been a head coach at both the college and the pro level, but he's been up there in the NFL for several years now, and he's coming back to the college game. Do you guys up there in Tuscaloosa expect any type of adjustment period for him? I think going against college defenses is different than going against NFL defenses.
I mean, possibly. I think that the adjustment would come, just getting back out there and recruiting again. That's the biggest adjustment, because, ball is ball a lot of the time. I expect him to run an offense. I mean, it's not like he's just going to come in and rip up the playbook either. He's going to put his wrinkle into Alabama's offense. He mentioned that it's not, it's always Alabama's offense. It's not just Bill O'Brien's offense. There could be a slight, adjustment period, but I don't actually expect that to be a factor, even in the opener. I think that, if anything, if there's a factor in that way, it's going to be, are the players, especially because there's a lot of new faces, are they well adjusted yet themselves? But as far as, him getting used to calling a game at the college level, I don't think it's going to be too big of a factor.
All right. And then lastly, I want to ask you about the Bama defense. People think that it might be better than last year's, which spearheaded the national title run. Your thoughts on that notion?
It will be better than last year's for sure. I think it has the capability of being one of Nick Saban's best. Now, does that mean I don't know what that means number wise, because I mean, college football is so different now than it was in 2011 when they were allowing 8.3 or something points per game, and they led I'm not sure if it's going to be as good as that unit, that 2011 one. That might have been one of the best, in college football history. But I think this will be right up there with one of the best defenses in the nation. They lose three key players, but only one from each area. So, they lost Christian Barmore, who's their leading sacks guy on the defensive line. They lost Dylan Moses, who was their leading tackler at linebacker, and then they lost Patrick Surtain, who was probably the best cornerback in college football last year. In terms of the linebacker, we'll hit that one first. I mean, they got Henry Tuatoa from Tennessee, so it pretty much almost replaces Dylan Moses right there, because you got an all SEC caliber linebacker to kind of fill in that role. The defensive line, there's a guy named Tim Smith. You guys might know about him. He's a sophomore, and I think he's going to come in, provide some of that pass rush ability that Barmore provided. But there's a lot of other, it's a very experienced front line. So I expect Alabama to kind of, improve just because it has so much experience there. The real question mark would be that cornerback spot, because Patrick Surtain was just so dominant I mentioned Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback. There's also Jalen Armour Davis. Somebody's going to have to fill in that role, that cornerback spot. And then, after that, I think you'll start seeing the secondary really gel. But that's the one question mark I think I'd put at the defense. It's going to be pretty strong, pretty straightforward as well.
Miami feels really good about what's going on the offensive side of the organization. It's going to be fun on opening night to see them go against a defense like that and just see what they've got. For those of us down here in South Florida, it's like we don't know what to expect. We want to see what they have. You got the Eric King coming back. They've got 3 running backs they feel good about. They've got a stable of receivers that seem to be making progress, a tight end. So they've got some tools on offense, and it's going to be interesting to see them go against the Bama defense. It's going to be a lot of fun up there in Atlanta. All right, so we appreciate your time. We'll hit you up in a few more weeks on game week to get a further update. He's Tony Tsoukalas, BamaInsider.com, the guy that knows it all about the Crimson Tide. I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time, everybody.